I think Dan's unique contribution here would be the fact that, I mean, he was around, right? Pre-Roe, he had a kind of like rich early life among gangsters, and he saw prostitutes getting abortions. He saw like failed abortions, right, and every kind of like spectrum in between. So why don't you talk about some of those realities and maybe some of the realities that will start coming back, right, with this decision?
So I had just turned 8 when abortion was outlawed. So for 7 years, you can throw away the first 4.5 years, but about 2.5, 3 full years, whatever it was. When I was a kid, I grew up in the Ridgewood section of New York. If you look on a map, here's Queens. Well, I guess it would be, well, here's
Yeah.
Queens, and then here's Brooklyn over here, and there's, the line basically runs almost straight. It varies a couple of blocks here or there. On the Brooklyn side of Ridgewood was Bushwick, and in the 1960s, 70s, Bushwick was like the South Bronx, and that it looked like Lebanon, burned out buildings and whatnot. And so when I was a kid, I lived just one block up from the border. So me and my friends would go and play. We'd play with some of the kids across the border who were black. I mean, literally, there wasn't a fence, but across what would have been, I think, Wyckoff Avenue and then Cypress Avenue were the two main avenues. Black people lived on one side, white people lived on the other side. And along Wyckoff Avenue, especially, there were a lot of prostitutes who worked there. There were gangsters. This was also Wyckoff Heights Hospital, I believe, was the name of the hospital there. It's probably still there. There was a methadone clinic for drug addicts. And in these burnt out buildings, and I wrote about this in True Life, me and my friends would often play. We'd play in these heroin galleries. What's a heroin gallery? Heroin galleries are where people who shot up heroin back in the 60s and 70s would just shoot up all day, and they would lay around in these buildings. They looked like what would later be people who had AIDS crossed with lepers, because their skin would take so many shots of the heroin that they would just become pustules. In here, this is where the prostitutes were, and you would have cars driving by, cruising, just like in Taxi Driver. You would see, guy come by. So young kids like me, the prostitutes would be back in the alleys, not necessarily out there, obviously street walking. They'd be back in the alleys. The cars would go by. Prostitute would say, "Here, I'll give you a quarter." A quarter in 1970 could get me a 15-cent comic, could get me a soda for 10 cents, or or whatever. And so we'd go out and we'd see the Johns. We go, "Hey, there's a girl back there. Take a look." And she'd come out, and she'd stand sexy or whatnot, prostitute sexy, drop her drawers or whatnot, show her goods. And if the guy said, "Yeah, get her in the car," I'd say, I'd run back. They give me the quarter. The girl would go and whatnot. So there were also homeless people that lived underneath the subway a block or two from where I lived, and these were people that were literally homeless. There was even an underground fire, and I had the hair burned off of my leg because of that underground fire with these homeless people. And these were some of the people who would end up in the abortion mill there. Now, this was just like, I think I've mentioned how there were gay bars who were all windows boarded up. This was a boarded up building. You'd go in the back, go down underneath, and this was run by a politician that I call John Doe. I won't use his real name, but the son of a bitch is still alive, making a hard push towards 100. But this guy was the quintessential Republican or right-wing anti-abortion guy. Oh, we're for family. I'm against abortion. I'm for the family. Yet he himself, and I know because one of the girls there was a couple of years older than him. There was a young girl who, she wasn't a prostitute, although he did often beat up prostitutes, and he fucking take cigarette butts and or lit cigarettes rather, and try to abuse their vaginal parts. But there was one girl who lived on my block later in Glendale who became involved when she was like 16 with this politician, got pregnant and had a back alley abortion here. Now, there were women that I would see, and they would come out, and their friend would be with them or something, and you could see a dark stain, let's say, in their jeans or their pants, whatever they were wearing. Sometimes you would hear about women being found just literally a block or two away. They'd walk and barely make it. This guy, who was the politician, himself had his own private doctor because he had money involved in this abortion mill. There were other ones that I heard about, but this is the one that was only 2 or 3 blocks from where I was on Wyckoff Avenue, and it was terrible because sometimes you might hear, let's use the name Kathy, who you knew from around the area. Oh, Kathy, she died or something, and you'd hear, yeah, oh, how did she die? Oh, she went to that place, the abortion mill, and it didn't make it or whatnot. Now, people would say, well, these people shouldn't be selling their bodies. These girls are, they're, this, that, or other thing. Even though the Bible, if you want to believe it, Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene, I mean, but that's what happened on a regular basis. I'm not every day, obviously, but every month or so you might hear about something that happened. That over the course of 3 years, there were a few dozen females, most of them poor, most of them either homeless who lived in the subway or prostitutes. The girls who wanted to get an abortion, who came from better families, usually better than where I live, they would go to Scarsdale, or they would go out onto Suffolk, or they would go to New Jersey, or wherever it was that they could go. Whatever states might have been different. I don't know the laws of Connecticut and New Jersey and whatnot, but this would happen all the time. Now, in New York, it may have been at some point that some things were legal, but the point is it wasn't freely legal, and therefore, or totally legal, all abortions at all times, and therefore you would have these things. Again, I'm not sure about if New York, it was totally illegal, because when Roe came along, I don't think there was no such thing as a national ban, as far as I know. Each state decided. I think New York, most of it was. I think they did have rape and incest, exceptions, and life of the mother kind of thing. But again, most abortions, you're not going to have life of the mother unless it's an ectopic pregnancy at 8 to 12 weeks or something. So that happened all the time. And again, this politician, who was a right-wing guy, who was law and order, family, who was, I'm not going to give any more details because people could figure it out. This guy was fucking young girls, not only prostitutes here and there, but quote unquote good girls, getting them pregnant, sending them to this place that he had an interest in, who was the financial back. And the guy was an Indian or Pakistani doctor who probably got his degree off the Indian equivalent of Kellogg's cereal or something. But it was just ridiculous, and no one cared about it in those days. No one cared about, and even those people who cared about the occasional middle class or rich girl who had an abortion mishap or had gone to this because they didn't want their parents to know, so they didn't maximize or get the best doctors themselves. Those who were the underclass, no one cared about it, and that's the way it's going to go. Hopefully, it doesn't get so bad. Hopefully, in the next year or two, something will happen that will do this. But I'm in the short term, I think it's pretty bleak.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely imagine there's probably going to be some events, right? Like, people don't really tend to pay attention all that much until, like we mentioned before, like if you have like a boxing ring, or like with like a between a woman and maybe like a former male, right, that's transitioned, you're gonna get some sort of situation eventually where there's gonna be a literal like death within a boxing ring or whatever it might be. And people will take notice then. They'll be like, okay, well, maybe we should reconsider, maybe readjust some of these rules. You're probably going to find, especially now, since like information is easier and easier to come by, you're going to get a couple things happening. One, you're going to have examples of women dying, right, due to botched abortions or whatever it might be. And the secondary part, and I think this will be kind of like funny to see, you're probably going to get a ton of politicians that are like very kind of like vocally anti-abortion. They're going to get entangled with like mistresses. They're going to be entangled with abortions in their own lives. I've known people, that worked in abortion clinics that were being picketed or whatever, being protested by various right wing activists, and like a week later, right, they'd see some of the girls are out there coming for their own abortions, right? Everybody in that situation, they're like, abortion should be illegal, but in my particular case, right, there's always that universalizing, or rather like anti-universalizing. In my particular case, right, it was fine, right? I had a reason for a blah blah blah. So, but given with the way that information travels these days compared to a few decades ago, this thing might get to some sort of like little explosive moment and then readjust itself a lot faster, right? We probably won't have a slow boil.
I gave you the pre-Roe thing. Then for a number of years, I had moved to another neighborhood in '74, a year after Roe, and that's actually in the late '70s was when the girl who the politician had impregnated. That's when that happened. It was legal to have an abortion, and he forced it to. And I don't believe she went to his clinic, but I mentioned before in my writing in when I was in the Hispanic gang in high school, there were a lot of prostitutes that came and went, but there were two of them that were friends. One was named Migdalia, and the other was named Carmen. Migdalia was a little bit older. She was actually quite beautiful, ethereal-looking Hispanic girl. Carmen, even though she was about 6 months or a year or so younger, was not as good looking and actually looked quite 3 or 4 years older because she was I think she had probably been on the streets longer. So two things happened. I want to talk about both of them in respect to abortion. The first one is Migdalia did have an abortion, and I escorted her to a clinic that's probably generally within near where you live. And then Migdalia actually was pregnant and miscarried. So I want to talk about not Migdalia, Carmen. Regarding Carmen, because she was a Catholic and she was a practicing Catholic and she felt bad about the miscarriage, she wanted to bury her quote unquote baby. So when I got to the place where she and Migdalia lived with a few other girls, they had this bloody thing. And so you're looking through, you need almost a fucking microscope to see this human being. And so if you look here, and I'll put it up, there's my pinky. Whoops. What the fuck?
No, it was there. Yes.
Yeah, there's my pinky nail. That pinky nail was probably not only the fetus, but because inside the red blotch, you could see an almost black thing. And that's what the fetus was at that point. So it was probably, again, the size of an insect, a small bug, if that. And to bury it, what are we going to use? Well, we use a fucking Coca-Cola bottle. So I remember taking my finger and jamming the fetus in there, putting it up. We went to one of the Rockaways. I think it was Far Rockaway. We took whatever train goes to Rockaway. We walked. We went on the beach. The girls did their hosannas, the Catholic bullshit, and I buried it. And my point to bring that up, even though it was an abortion, is look at your fucking pinky nail. How many fucking human beings that are half an inch long are there? Have you ever had a good discussion with a half-inch tall human being? Have you ever grown affection for a half-inch tall human being? No, because they don't have the ability to talk. They don't have the ability to reason. They have no cognition. They have barely any functioning parts. Putting aside the idea that they are a part of the mother's body, which when we end this, we need to talk about 50 years from now when that happens, fetus can be gone, can be raised extra utero. But the second thing, Migdalia. Now, Migdalia, she had an abortion, and amongst many things, this probably led to her death, although I never saw her body. She was forced to have an abortion. She would have had it herself, but her pimp, and before I play into the Jodie Foster stereotypes, I'm pro-sex worker. 5 to 10% of prostitutes in America have been streetwalkers. The other 90% have been invisibly hidden. So I'm not begging that, but this guy was a son of a bitch who forced her, or made it clear that she needed to have an abortion. So we went to this place, which was a medical building, again, as I said, somewhere near where you reside now. And I remember I walked her up, and I think I borrowed someone's car. We didn't take the train. I think I borrowed someone's car, or someone drove us there. And we were dropped off about 3 or 4 blocks away so that they couldn't get the car license number, because this is what these motherfuckers did. They would get the license numbers of cars and then find out where this person lived and harass them. Now, it wouldn't have mattered in this case because this was someone else's car. So we're walking there, and there are these people, holding the things. There's barricades there. This is 1981 or 82. I was 16 or 17, and I probably walked 6, 7 times, no more than 8 or 10 at the most, maybe only 4 or 5. It's hard to remember, but I remember Migdalia's one because I was closer to her, and also this was where the incident happened. There's this big, corpulent, fat fuck, white guy, probably at the time 42, 45, probably younger than 50. And they're all chanting their bullshit, they got the signs. And you had to go up about 7 or 8 steps to get to the door. And as we're coming, someone is they missed us, but they're like tossing like ketchup, onto the stairs. The fat fuck comes up thinking he can intimidate him. Now, I'm not trying to sound like I'm Jean-Claude Van Damme, but it was one of my best shots. When the guy came up there, I remember just sticking out and boom, and just hitting him. I guess it was in the solar plexus or maybe the upper chest. And the fat guy was like Humpty Dumpty, just a round piece of shit. And he fell back down the 4 or 5 steps onto his ass. And we went in. An hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, later, the sun, it was. The procedure itself was perfectly normal. There was no complications or whatnot. We're coming out. They're still there. And I remember when I and she walked away, there was a silence. There was a kind of like, oh, wait, let's not get, because even though I was only a teenager, they saw that I fought back against them. And this is a lesson to be learned. Everyone says never again. The whole Holocaust thing, even though many genocides happen, never again. It'll always happen again unless you stand up. And you have to stand up against people who want to take your rights, people who want to intimidate you, people who want to commit whatever crimes they have in their mind to you. If you stand up, people will take notice, because unfortunately, we still live in a world where violence is the universal language. It's an unfortunate thing. It's not something that I'm saying to say, oh, I stood up against these stupid son of a bitches. But look at the Democratic Party. They are, I call them the Vichy Democrats. I call them collaborationists for the last 40 years, not only on abortion, but on all things pertaining to civil rights. The Democrats have not given a flying fuck. And if a 16, 17-year-old boy like me, who, I wasn't that big, I wasn't that strong, just stands up and says, no, that's not going to happen, it's not going to stop the whole movement, but it will put a little bit of fear in them. And that's what these people are. I say they have always been domestic terrorists. And, the only way sometimes is to fight fire with fire. It's a cliche, but those are the two things. The Carmen miscarry, people aren't the size of pinky nails, and you have to stand up for yourself, because if you're not willing to stand up for yourself, and hopefully most women will get motivated, because men aren't going to do it. Women have to be the ones at the forefront saying, fuck no, we're not going back to abortion mills. We're not going back. Just the way blacks have to be the people that say, fuck no, we're going back. And you can look, Japanese Americans, after they were interned, they basically fought for 45, 50 years. They got their slight reparations, but they stood up. And I see, I I can't say totally with the way the right wing is here, but it would be very difficult to find anyone willing to intern any kind of group. Look, the Muslims evaded being interned after 9/11. So I think a lesson from Japanese internment is to stand up. And when you stand up, a lot of these cowards are going to back down. And I've seen it, however micro a situation that was 40 some years ago.